Well, good day, everyone, wherever you might be, and welcome to another Claris Engage Beyond 2021 session. My name is Steve Romig, and I will be your host and presenter today. I am super excited to welcome all of you who are new to the Claris FileMaker platform, and those of you who have started creating your first app and are looking to spread your wings a little bit more. In either case, this session is definitely for you. Now, for the next several minutes during this Idea to App presentation, I aim to excite you and inspire you to take the next step in your FileMaker journey. I want you to walk away feeling, you know what, I can do that, or you know what, that wasn't too hard. As I am fond of saying, FileMaker Pro is really only limited by your imagination. We have got a lot to cover today, so let's get started. Now, of course, we want you to have the best experience possible today. Still, we realize technology doesn't always behave the way it should. So, if you do encounter any technical issues with GoToWebinar, please contact their technical support at 1-833-851-8340. And if you're joining us from outside of the US, please call 0-800-031-4760. Now, as you were probably expecting, we are going to take some questions at the end. So, if you have a question, go to the GoToWebinar control panel and click on the Questions section. From there, enter your question and click on the Send button. Now, I'll cover as many questions as time allows at the end. But if I don't get to your question today, I'm going to do my best to follow up in a few days with some answers in the Claris community. Now, before we dive in, let's start by covering what Claris FileMaker Pro is and how people like all of you can get started using it. Claris FileMaker is an app development platform that has a proven track record of helping people just like yourselves build powerful business solutions for over 30 years. Claris has over 1 million customers worldwide and many from successful Fortune 500 companies. Claris FileMaker Pro offers you the flexibility to access your custom app on macOS, Windows, iOS, and web browsers. In addition, if you want to share your app with others, you can decide whether to use Claris to host your app in the cloud, or if deploying them on a local server makes more sense to you. Most people new to FileMaker start by using one of our free built-in solutions. They cover a wide range of tasks like managing your contacts, keeping track of invoices or projects, and working out in the field on a research project, just to name a few examples. And if you need more help along the way, we have a rich Claris ecosystem with thousands of developers worldwide that have your back. I'll provide some more of these resources at the end of today's presentation, so stay tuned. What you might not know is that the Claris platform is way more than just FileMaker Pro. You do use FileMaker Pro to create all of your custom apps, and it is also the application you use to run your apps on macOS and Windows. Now, I briefly touched on sharing your app, but you can use FileMaker Cloud or FileMaker Server to do just that. You can start with teams as small as 5 users and add more as your needs grow using either one. Now, you can run these same apps on your iPhone and iPad using FileMaker Go. This free download is available in the App Store for your device. And suppose you want to access your app in a web browser. In that case, we got you covered there too with FileMaker WebDirect, which is a component of FileMaker Server and FileMaker Cloud. And finally, we have a dedicated product for integrating with other apps and web services called Claris Connect, which also integrates nicely with your FileMaker apps if needed. Now, for many of you, Claris Connect might be a new thing, so let me take a minute to dive a little deeper into what it is. Claris Connect is a cloud-based integration platform that allows you to create entire workflows by connecting applications together. If that sounds hard or complicated, it really isn't. Claris Connect lets you create integrations in minutes and not days using a simple point-and-click experience. Some examples of what you can do with Claris Connect include adding a new subscriber to MailChimp when a new contact is created in Microsoft Outlook, or maybe send a Slack message to somebody when the status of an order changes in your FileMaker app. The integration possibilities are really virtually endless. See for yourself by starting a free trial at claris.com and clicking on the Try button. Before today's session, we asked you what you wanted to build today. You all came up with some great suggestions, so thank you for taking the time to do that. We received hundreds of submissions, including many business challenges like projects, research, contacts, and a whole lot more. but the task we received the most interest in was content management. Now, if your task was not selected this time, don't worry. My goal for today is to introduce you to some FileMaker features that might go into a content management app. But the reality is, you could apply what we covered today toward any custom app you are working on. Here is a partial list of what we're going to tackle today. By creating a FileMaker custom app, we will create a central repository that can have different levels of access if need be, is searchable, and can build reports. We will also keep track of notes and details about each of our pieces of content. We also want to make it easier for managing approvals. Maybe have a list where we can pick a name or check a box. And finally, we want to produce and automate a report that we can hand off to management. And we need to do all of this and more in about 30 minutes. So let's roll up our collective virtual sleeves and get started. Now for many of you, this is what your current database looks like. For simple database applications, a spreadsheet works and works quite well. But as many of you have found out already, it is super easy to outgrow the capabilities of using a spreadsheet as a database. For example, you mail it to somebody, they make changes, you make changes. What do? And spreadsheets are great for crunching numbers, but not great for storing files. So unless you're a spreadsheet Jedi, this is where our story begins today. Here we have a list of some content. I want to point out a couple of things. 1, this spreadsheet contains column headers that might translate well into field names in a database. And 2, there's a place to store content, but as you can see, it's blank. Now I want to get this content into FileMaker Pro to make it more manageable and to do more things with it. Lucky for me, getting my spreadsheet data into FileMaker Pro is drag and drop simple. Now unlike spreadsheet applications, FileMaker Pro saves my data automatically. However, for this functionality to work correctly, I need to provide a file name and where I want to store my data up front. I'm going to call my file Content Management, and I'm just going to save it on my desktop. Remember, I pointed out that our spreadsheet has a row that would be good to use as field names. Well, I can specify that over here. Now, before I click the Convert button, I should consider providing a table name that makes more sense. Now, since I'm bringing in content information, it probably makes sense for me to call the table Content. As a reminder, tables in FileMaker Pro are used to collect data about a subject, such as customers, students, classes, whatever. So, after renaming the table Content, I'll click on Convert and bring in my spreadsheet data. And here is your data in FileMaker Pro. Now, I know what you might be thinking. This looks very similar to how your data looked in a spreadsheet. How is this an improvement? Well, this table view is one of many different ways you can view your data in FileMaker Pro. But it's not the only way. Each view of your data is referred to as a layout in FileMaker Pro. A layout is an arrangement of objects that includes fields, pictures, text, buttons, and other graphic elements. Layouts represent how your information is organized and presented when you perform things like data entry, print your data, or create reports. You can switch to different layouts in your custom app right here. And you can see FileMaker automatically made another one called Layout Number 1. Now, this layout shows one record at a time and is referred to in the world of FileMaker Pro as a form layout. Your custom app can have as many layouts as necessary. Therefore, you might have a layout for data entry, you might have another layout for printing, you can even design unique layouts to use on mobile devices or in an internet browser. We're going to spend most of our time today customizing the look and feel of this layout with additional features and functionality. To begin customizing this or any layout in FileMaker Pro, you need to be in layout mode. Right now, we're in browse mode. And it is in browse mode where you will do your data entry. But to modify how my data is presented, I need to be in layout mode. Over here in the right-hand corner is an Edit Layout button. And when I click on it, I switch to layout mode. And as you can see, the screen changes pretty drastically. On the right side of the screen is the inspector. The inspector allows you to view and edit the settings for objects on your layout. The left side of the screen serves several different purposes depending on the tab you have selected. The Fields tab provides a list of fields that you can drag onto a layout. The Fields tab also provides a convenient way to create new fields as well. And remember that first row in our spreadsheet? Well, these are the fields that FileMaker Pro automatically created for us based on that data. The Objects pane includes a list of all of the different items on my layout, be it a field, a text block, a graphic image, whatever. And lastly, we have the Add-ons tab. Add-ons allow you to add predefined functionality to your apps quickly by simple drag and drop. And as a reminder, you can toggle the display of either one of these panes in layout mode using these controls in the corner. Let's start customizing our app by adding some simple text and a logo to our layout. I can use drag and drop and the tools in the status toolbar along the top of the screen to accomplish this. Using the text tool, I can add a company name or the name of the layout or anything I want. I'm going to type My Content Management, and I can go back and change this anytime I want. Adding an image is easy too. I can just drag and drop it on my layout and move it to where I want it to display. This layout already has a header part, so that seems like an excellent place to put it along with the text I just added. A content management solution is pretty useless without a way of storing content, right? And right now, we don't have any content. Content comes in all forms. Maybe it's an image, some audio, a word processing document, or a PDF document. You can store all of these types of content in FileMaker Pro in a container field. Container fields are pretty versatile, as they store data directly in your custom app or can be configured to point to data you already have on your hard drive. In addition, depending on the type of data you choose to store in a container field, you can interact with it directly from within FileMaker Pro. Now remember, I pointed out earlier that our spreadsheet had a content column, but it didn't have anything in it. We can use that field as a container field. But look, FileMaker brought it over as a text field. No problem. Not only can we create new fields using the Fields pane, but we can modify existing fields too. I am simply going to change this field to a container field, and it is ready to accept our content. Now, since we are likely to interact with the content in the container field, I'm going to move and resize this container field. You can resize pretty much any object in layout mode by simply selecting it and then grabbing one of these handles in the corner and resizing it to your needs. Now, there are several different ways to add content to a container field, but the easiest way is to drag and drop. I'm going to go ahead and add some content to a few records so we have something to work with in view. I'm going to bring in an image or two and also a PDF. Now, remember what I said that you could interact with specific content when you put it in a container field? This is true. Let's take a closer look at this PDF file. Right now, it doesn't look very interactive. Now, for some of you, that might be enough. But if we want to turn up the coolness a notch, you can make a container field an interactive container field. You do this back in layout mode using the inspector. With my container field selected, I will click the Data tab and scroll down to the bottom to the Data Formatting section. Here, I see some options for my container field. Watch what happens when I select interactive content. When I switch back to browse mode, look at my PDF now. I can see it and I can scroll through the pages of it. As we start building out our content management app, it might be helpful to have a way to identify what the different pieces of content are at a glance. We could use a content type field. So let's create one and add it to our layout. I'll click on the New Field button and define the field, calling it Content Type and making it a text field. Next, I'll add it to our layout. This field will work as is, but it has some underlying problems regarding data entry. For starters, when identifying an image, some might call it an image, others might call it a photo, and others still will call it a picture or something else we weren't even thinking of. Or, if you're like me, you might be prone to an innocent typo here and there and might misspell the word image. All of these can cause our data to become less than accurate and harder to work with. We can address this problem by providing a list of valid choices to those doing data entry. In FileMaker Pro, we call these value lists. Value lists save you time, ensure accuracy, and define frequently used values. Value list can take the form of a checkbox, where you can select multiple values at a time, or a pull-down list or menu, to name a few formats. A pull-down list seems appropriate for selecting the content type, but feel free to use whatever makes sense for your app. Now, defining and using a value list involves 2 steps. The first is defining the value list itself and what values will be displayed. This is done by going to the File menu, choosing Manage, and then choosing Value Lists. When creating a new value list, we are asked where the values of our value list will come from. Value lists can be hard-coded into your custom app, or they can be defined from data you might already have. Since we just created this content type field, there isn't any data to use, so we will hard-code the possible values. We already know we have PDF and images, so we should add those for sure. But let's also add video, audio, and text file to the list. This completes step 1. Step 2 is telling FileMaker Pro which field to format as a value list. This is done back in layout mode. All I need to do is click on the field I want to format, select the Data tab from the inspector, and choose the format of the value list that I want. Once I choose the format, I then select the value list that I defined in step 1, in this case, the type value list. And when I switch back to browse mode, you can see I have a convenient way of selecting the type of content I have using a list. Another great thing about value lists is that you can reuse them. If I wanted to use the same list of values for another field, I just repeat step 2 to format that field as a value list and point it to the value list that I defined in step 1. Our custom app is slowly coming together and has some functionality in it that a spreadsheet just cannot match. Now, for the next few minutes, let's work on making the overall user experience better. In other words, let's make our layout more visually appealing. One way we can do that is with a tab panel. You have probably used apps that have tabs in them, and the overall usage of tabs in FileMaker Pro is pretty much the same. Tab panels are great to help with entering and viewing data, eliminating the need to make extra layouts to display information, and in the case of our layout, we can use a tab control to declutter the number of fields on a layout and use the same layout space to display different information. For starters, we need to make room for the tab panels, so for now, let's move and resize our container field. To create a tab panel, use the panel button in the layout toolbar. It isn't obvious at first glance, but this button serves 2 purposes. This button can either create a tab control or a slide control. Both are pretty similar in functionality and work on either a desktop or mobile device, but visually they are a bit different. As you might expect, a tab control has tabs along the top that you can use to switch from one tab to another. A slide control provides a more mobile app experience where you can swipe from one panel to another using your finger. We're going to create a tab control today, but feel free to experiment with either one in your custom apps. To create a tab control, click the button and then draw out the size of the tab control on your layout. Don't worry, you can resize it later if you didn't size it perfectly the first time. When I let go of the mouse, the tab control setup dialog appears and provides me with some options for creating the tabs that I might need. I'm going to create a tab called Main, one called Details, and one called Notes. Now there's some other options on the right side of the screen to further define the look and feel of the tabs, but I'm going to leave them at the default settings and click OK. And even though we're still in layout mode, I get a sense of how one might interact with my tab control. And at any time, I can get back to the tab control setup screen by simply double-clicking on the tab control itself. Now the content that I will display in a tab needs to fit inside the confines of the tab control itself. In other words, it needs to fit inside this box. If I have a layout object hanging over the boundary of a tab control, FileMaker Pro is going to get confused about where that layout object should appear and will likely display it in a way you are not expecting. So I'm going to start dragging some fields over that I want to put in the main tab. This includes our container field, the content type field, the creator, and the approved field. I'm going to add some fields to the Details tab as well, and for now, I'm going to leave the Notes tab blank. Finally, I'm going to move some other fields to the top of the layout that I want to see regardless of what tab is selected. Let's check out what happens when I switch from one tab to another in layout mode. And let's check it out in browse mode too. As you can see, tab controls are a great way to provide any layout with a modern design touch. Let's revisit the Notes tab. This provides a good place for us to add some additional information about the particular content we are looking at. Maybe some specific details about the content, some history, perhaps even some review information. Now, I could add a big text field to the Notes tab and use that to take notes. But what if there are multiple notes about a piece of content? Or I wanted to keep track of notes that I might have entered and notes that someone else entered. This sounds like a perfect time to introduce the concept of relationships and portals in FileMaker Pro. But before we do, let's take a look at the structure of our custom app as it stands right now. If we click File, Manage, Database, we are presented with the Manage Database dialog box. This dialog shows us the tables defined in our database, the fields defined in our database, and the relationships we have set up between the table occurrences in our database. As you can see, we have only one table, and we don't have any relationships set up at this time. A file with only one table is sometimes referred to as a flat file. Strap in, everyone. We're about to take our content management custom app relational. But what is a relational database, and why should I care? Well, first, relational databases are powerful in that they typically store data in only one place. But that data can be related to other pieces of data. This means if I change a piece of data, it gets changed everywhere it's used. So for example, if I had an order database that kept track of customers and their phone numbers, if that customer's phone number changed, I could change it in one place, and that change would appear everywhere the customer's phone number was displayed. Now, a critical concept of a relational database is something called a primary key. This is a field that uniquely identifies a particular record. Depending on the type of custom app you're working with, this might be something like an employee ID or a part number, just to cite two examples. Our database currently doesn't have such a field. Now, we can easily create one, and it doesn't have to be super elaborate either. For example, a primary key can simply be a unique number. So let's create a new number field, call it pKey for primary key, and let's modify the options of this field so that it auto-enters a serial number incremented by 1. Okay, back to the subject of notes. We're going to use something called an add-on to provide us the functionality to keep track of notes. An add-on is a relatively new feature to FileMaker Pro and is a pre-designed set of components that can be added to a custom app to perform specific actions or tasks. An add-on may include layouts, layout objects, schema, scripts, value lists, and all of those work together. You might remember earlier that I pointed out the Add-ons tab while we were in layout mode, but it was blank. This is because our custom app didn't have any add-ons installed yet. When you install an add-on, you make it available to your custom app. If I browse the list of available add-ons, they are divided into different categories. Some of the more advanced add-ons are JavaScript enabled, but require no advanced coding skills to use. The JavaScript add-ons provide feature-rich calendars, Kanban boards, rich text editor functionality, and more. FileMaker Pro ships with 9 Java-enabled add-ons, and more are available in the Claris marketplace. If I keep scrolling, I see additional add-ons and the Notes one that I'm looking for. I'm going to go ahead and select it and click Choose to install it. Now for the record, I took the time to create a primary key earlier because most add-ons require a primary key, and you'll get an error message if you try to use one in your custom app that doesn't have one. In general, it is always a good idea to have a primary key or some type of unique identifier in each of your tables in your custom apps. Alright, to use the Notes add-on, I need to drag it where I want it to go. Now it doesn't look like much in layout mode, so let's switch to browse mode, create a new record, and see how this add-on works. As I hoped, it's allowing me to add individual notes to a record. But let's look what happened behind the scenes. Where we once had a single table, we now have two. And the add-on also created a relationship to join that new table with our existing content table. Congratulations, everyone. You just took your first relational database step. Are you ready to take another one? Let's revisit our layout again. You might have wondered why I went out of my way to leave such a wide open space on the left side of our layout. I was leaving some space to add a navigation aid to our custom app. I want to provide a list of all the projects that we have, and when I click on one, I want to see the details of that project. If you have used a contacts app on your computer or your mobile device, you know what I'm talking about. You click on a contact from a list, and you see all the details about that contact. In the world of FileMaker Pro, this is known as a list detail layout, and it is a lot easier to create than you might think. It involves using something called a portal. A portal is a layout object in FileMaker Pro that displays data in rows from a related table. And guess what? You're already familiar with portals because we used a portal to create notes earlier. The difference then was the add-on created the portal for us, but we're going to do it on our own this time. Up in the toolbar in layout mode is the portal tool. Its usage is similar to the panel tool we used earlier. You click it, and you draw where you want your portal to display on the screen. When you let go of the mouse, the portal setup dialog is displayed. I want to point out the Show Records From pull-down list. When you click on the list, you can see our notes relationship is available because it's a related table. Now, when I was explaining what a portal was earlier, I purposely left something out. Portals have always shown data from related tables, but recent updates to FileMaker Pro have granted portals even more superpowers. Portals can now display records from the current table too. When I select Current Table, some options become available while others do not apply when viewing records from the current table. Now I'm going to leave all of these in the default setting and just click OK. Next, FileMaker Pro is asking me what data I want to display in this portal. Project name makes sense, so I'll select that, and maybe I'll throw status in there too. When I'm done, I click on OK. Now, just like our Notes add-on, this portal doesn't look like much in layout mode. But let's see what we can do with it when we switch back to browse mode. Sure enough, it provides a list of all of my projects and the status of that project. When I click on one, it fills in the details on the right side of the screen for me. And that is how easy it is to create a list detail layout in FileMaker Pro. Before we wrap up today, I have one more thing I want to show you all, and that is scripting. A script is one or more instructions, we call them script steps, that you define to automate repetitive or complex tasks. You create and manage scripts using the script workspace. You run a script by clicking a button, choosing it from a menu, calling it from another script, or doing something in your custom app that causes the script to trigger. Scripts are arguably one of the most powerful features that FileMaker Pro offers, but they are often the most misunderstood feature many new to the product say they just can't figure out. I'm here to tell you that scripts are not that hard. If you can read a recipe out of a cookbook, you have a pretty good handle on scripts in my opinion. Here is what we're going to accomplish in the last few minutes we have together. We are going to create a new layout that will provide us a breakdown of the status of our projects because, bosses always want to know the status of projects. We are then going to create a script that switches to that layout, prepares the report for us, and then saves it out to a PDF that we can email to our boss. And we're going to attach that script to a button to make creating the report one-click simple. This is a perfect application for a script because it involves doing the same steps in the same order every time you want to run the report. Sure, in this pretty simple example, you could do all of these steps manually, but why would you want to if you can have FileMaker Pro do it for you? And you know what? In my description of what I wanted to do, I pretty much just wrote the script. I want to switch to a layout, prepare the report by sorting, and then save the report to PDF. Those are 3 steps I need the script to perform. Now, before we can write the script, I need to create a new layout to use for reporting. In layout mode, I'm going to click the New Layout Report button in the toolbar. The next several screens are going to walk me through creating the report that I want. I'm going to select Printer and then Report to continue. My content management solution does not have any numbers in it at this time, so I will deselect these options before I click Next. Next, FileMaker Pro is asking me what fields I want on my report. I'm going to choose project name and status for sure, but I can add some additional fields here if I think they'll make sense. Next, FileMaker Pro is asking me how I want to group my records on the report. Status seems like a good field to group by, so I'm going to select that. The next screen is asking how I want to sort my records. In the previous step, since I specified I want to group my records by status, FileMaker Pro has already included that field in the sort order. If I wanted to, I could include additional fields in the sort order. I'm okay for now, so I'm just going to click on Next. This next screen asks if I want to add any additional information to either the header or the footer of my report. This includes stuff like page number or the date, among other things. I'm going to leave those alone for now and click Continue. The last step is FileMaker asking us if we want to create a script to automate the creation of this report. But you know what? That's cheating. We want to do it ourselves. So I'm going to select Do Not Create Script and click Finish. FileMaker shows us the new layout in layout mode. You can edit this if you want, but for our needs, it's just fine. I do want to point out that this layout is using a special layout part called a subsummary. Subsummaries are a very powerful feature of FileMaker Pro, and I encourage you to play around with them more if you're going to be doing a lot of reporting and number crunching. My parting tip for using subsummaries is to make sure you always sort your data on the break field you use when defining your subsummary. Okay, we have our layout ready to go. Now we can create our script. To create a script, click on the Scripts menu and choose Scripts Workspace. You'll notice there's already a script there. But wait a minute, we never created one. Where did that come from? Well, it came from our old friend, the add-on. Add-ons can not only add tables and relationships to your custom app, but they can add scripts too. Go ahead and create a new script and call it Status Report. Now, let's remember those 3 steps. Step 1 was to go to a new layout. Over on the right-hand side is a list of available script steps. It might seem overwhelming at first, but keep in mind most of them usually correspond with something that you can do manually in the product. So if we need to go to a layout, it might make sense to look in the navigation script steps for some help. Sure enough, there is Go to Layout. If I double click on it, it becomes part of my script that I'm working on. Now most scripts have additional options that need to be configured, and the Go to Layout script step is no exception. It needs to know what layout we want to go to. In our case, it is our newly created layout number 3. By the way, you can rename your layouts anytime you want while in layout mode. And as our custom apps become more complex, it probably makes sense for you to do so you don't have a lot of generically named layouts to deal with. Okay, step 1 is done. Step 2 is I need to sort my records. Now, I could look for the step on the right side, but I want to show you a power tip. If I start typing what I think the script step might be called, look what happens. FileMaker Pro provides me with a list to choose from. The Sort Records script step has some options as well. Specifically, it is asking for what fields to sort by. We need to make sure that the status field is selected before continuing. We also want to turn the sort dialog off while this script is running. You might want to display it in certain circumstances if you want your users to choose the fields you want to sort by. But in our case, we don't need to display it. Step 2, done. The last step is to save this report as a PDF. Let's try the type ahead feature again and see what it comes up with. Sure enough, there is Save Records as PDF. It also has some options we need to configure, including what we want to call the PDF and where we want to save it. If I specify the file name, it will save in the exact location where my custom app is. In this case, on my desktop, which is where I want it to be. Step 3, done. And so is our script. Make sure you save your changes before leaving Script Workspace. We're in the home stretch, everyone. If you're not already looking at layout number 1, get there now. You can add the button pretty much anywhere on the layout. I am going to add it in the upper right-hand corner. I click on the button tool in the toolbar and draw where I want the button to go. Up pops up the button setup dialog box. I choose how I want my button to display. Do I want text? Do I want some icons? Let's go with a little bit of both. I select an icon for my button and provide the text to go with it. Now, this button currently isn't going to do anything if I click on it. I need to tell it to run the script I just created from this list. All right, save the changes to your layout, cue the drum roll, and let's see what happens when we click on our button. Look at that. A PDF has been created with a breakdown of our projects by status. We did it. We accomplished a lot in about 30 minutes. And I hope I fulfilled my goal of getting you excited to try new things and take the next step toward either prototyping your own custom app or adding functionality to an existing one. With FileMaker Pro, you can tackle any project efficiently and store any type of data that comes your way. And you can make it easy for others to access that data, whether they are using a computer, a mobile device, or a web browser. So, where do you go from here? Well, here is a list of your virtual homework. If you have not done so already, download the free 45-day trial of Claris FileMaker Pro and see how it can bring your ideas to life. And the great thing about the trial is it is fully functional, and the app you design is fully compatible with a licensed copy of FileMaker Pro if you decide to take the next step. Now, if you want to learn more about what we talked about today, the Claris Academy is the perfect guide to help you learn more about the Claris Platform. It includes beginner and advanced topics, and it is also a free resource. And finally, as you begin your journey with us, you may decide that having some help is the best course of action for you. You can talk to a certified FileMaker expert to help you build an app unique to your business requirements. Visit our Claris resource page today and find a Claris partner near you. And the last resource I want to point out today is one I have touched on a couple of times already, and that is the Claris community. Here you can network with others just like you, and more importantly, get your questions answered. The Claris community is full of helpful and knowledgeable people and developers to make your development journey easy and fulfilling. It is an excellent resource whether you are just starting out with FileMaker Pro or have been using it for years. Okay, everybody, so we do have a few minutes left for questions. So I'm going through the list right now, and the first one that I came across, very good question indeed, is how do I get my app on a mobile device? That is a very common question. A lot of people obviously want to be able to do that. The first thing that you want to do is, of course, download FileMaker Go. That is the app available in the App Store that runs on iOS devices, both iPhone and iPad, and allows you to take your custom apps as is and run them on your mobile devices. But how do you get them there? Well, actually, there's a whole bunch of ways. I'm just going to name a few, not necessarily in any order of preference of which you use, but you can use AirDrop, for example. You can AirDrop your custom app to your mobile device if you want. You can email it to yourself. That's another common way of doing it. And you can even create a link on a web page and download the app that way as well. So many, many different ways of getting your app on your mobile device. Just pick the one that works best for you. Second question, let's see. When you created the Notes add-on, you created a new record, but the serial number did not populate in the other records. How do you fix that? You guys were paying attention. That is absolutely true. When I created the serial number field or the P key field and used the serial number option, it would only create new serial numbers when I create a new record. If I wanted to go back and fix that and populate the other 6 or 7 records that I had, I would want to use a feature in FileMaker Pro called Replace Field Content. You can find that under the browse, while you're in browse mode, under the records menu. How that works is you can take your records in your database, or even a subset of the records in your database, and you can populate data in a particular field or fields based on some criteria. For example, you could replace the contents of a field with the word blue if you wanted to. In our case, it also gives you the option of being able to put those serial numbers in there also, and it will automatically update the options that we set for the P key field. So if you wanted it to start with number 1 and increment by 5, you could do that. So I would definitely investigate using the replace field contents if that's something that you're interested in doing. Let's see. I have a date field in my custom app. Can I have FileMaker Pro highlight the data in that field if the data falls within a certain date range? That's also a really good question, and one that comes up quite a bit. The answer, of course, is yes. I feel like I'm probably going to be saying yes for a lot of these questions today. This requires using something called conditional formatting. Now, if that sounds scary, it really isn't. You can use conditional formatting on any field, and actually you can use it on other layout objects as well. But we'll talk about the field for right now. So for field, you need to be in layout mode, and you'll want to go to the format menu, and there you'll see something that says conditional. When you select that, you write a calculation or a statement that when something is true, this field will do whatever you want it to do. In this case, maybe you want the text to be red. So in the case of the date range, you might want to say, if my date field is between, I don't know, September 1st and September 14th, make this text red. Now you can be a lot more creative with that. You could even have it do, show me all of the records and make them red if they are 7 days from today. FileMaker has the ability and knows what the current date is, so you could write a calculation that allows you to do that. So all of those would require the use of something called conditional formatting, and we have plenty of information about that in our knowledge base as well as in Claris Academy. Probably have time for 1 or 2 more questions here. How about, can you elaborate on the different ways to store data in a container field? Sure. In my example, there's 2 ways that you can store data in a container field. One is embedded and one is external. Those are really fancy words for, do I want to store it in my database or do I want to store it outside of my database? In my example today, when I was using the drag and drop, I was embedding it into our custom app. This means that it's part of my file. If I made a copy of that file and gave it to one of you, you would be able to open it up and you would be able to see the data that was in that container field, no problem. The downside to sometimes using embedding is if you're storing a lot of content, your file can get really big really fast. And sometimes people have the content that they want to store in FileMaker or they want to manage in FileMaker already really well organized on their hard drive. If that's the case, then you might want to consider using external. What that means is you tell FileMaker Pro, hey, you know what? I've got this container field, but I have all of this content somewhere else. I'm just going to point to it. So that keeps your file size much smaller. It allows you to keep all of your data where it is. You can also use some security and some encryption in this case, so you can make sure that your data is very secure. The only downside to this would be if I use the same scenario that I just said earlier, and I wanted to give a copy to one of you guys, you wouldn't be able to see that data unless I was hosting it in a central place where you had access to it. So those are the pros and cons of using embedded versus external when it comes to container fields. Well, everybody, sadly, we have come to the end of our time together today. But we're just getting started. In about 15 minutes, we have another session for those new to Claris that goes over many of the resources that can help you get the most out of the Claris ecosystem. And then right after that session, we have a virtual meet and greet with many leaders of the Claris community. But if you haven't registered for either one of those yet, don't worry, you still have time. Visit www.claris.com/engage and sign up right now. So on behalf of everyone at Claris, I want to thank you for spending the last several minutes with me, and I hope you are inspired to take that next step in turning your ideas into a custom app of your very own. Take care, everyone.